Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery, and I'm going to start today's video by reading a passage from Recovery 2.0 by Tommy Rosen. If you ask most people in recovery why they stay sober, they will tell you they do so because they have to. Others will say they stay sober because they'll die if they don't. Still others will tell you they aren't scared of dying so much as living through the pain of addiction. In almost every case, recovering addicts will cite the terrible things that will happen if they use again, if they go back. It is very rare to find a person in recovery who can look into their heart and tell you, I stay sober because I want to. I have found true recovery, and I love my life as a sober person. I prefer this state of being to using drugs, alcohol, and acting out in other addictive ways. That person is rare indeed. So many of us have been clear about what we stand against, but less clear about what we stand for. Now, there's one thing that I disagree with in that paragraph, and that's where he says that the people who stay sober because they want to, because they found true recovery, those people are rare. I have met a lot of those people, at least a lot of the people who seemed like they're that way, and I count myself among them. Sure, I acknowledge that if I go back to using drugs or alcohol, bad things are very likely to happen. But that's not really why I stay sober these days. The reason I stay sober is because I love this life so much. This life that I have right now, this life of spiritual growth, this life of being able to drop into every moment and to be present and to know that I'm doing the right thing in life and not having to question that, and my ability to love other people, all of these things add up to me loving the sober, recovering lifestyle. So, yes, there is always a healthy dose of fear of if I go back to using, I could be in serious trouble. But that's not really the driving force for me. And I think a lot of other people are like that in recovery. I'm not sure it's as rare as Tommy says it is, because I meet a lot of people who are very in love with the person they've become in recovery. Now, I will say, though, that it does seem like people who are in recovery out of fear are more common. And that's purely anecdotal. I don't have any stats to back that up. But it certainly seems like when you do talk to people, you run into more people who say, I can't go back, I could die. And that's their primary reason for being in recovery rather than a love of the life that they've built in recovery. And so I know what he's saying there, but I do think that I do really identify with the idea of loving the recovery life, the sober life, the spiritual life I found. I want to read another paragraph that he says about this, that he wrote about this. He says, some people have asked me over the years, aren't you recovered now? Can't you drink or smoke a joint without getting into trouble with it? So that's something that a lot of us in recovery have thought about. Can't I, now that I've made spiritual progress, doesn't that mean that I can go back and maybe moderate my use? But let's hear what he says here. My answer to them is simple. I have no desire to. I love my life as a sober person. I walk this drugless path and I get to feel everything that happens in life. And I want to go into that in a second. But first, getting cravings and wanting to get high, that's common early in recovery, and it's something that all of us deal with periodically throughout recovery. But when I knew that I had really found something worth holding on to was when I did not have that desire. The cravings came as almost kind of a side effect type of thing, almost kind of an involuntary tick. And the cravings were there, but it wasn't a craving I felt in my heart, if that makes any sense. It was something that I could observe as, oh, there's a craving. I just have to sit through this and I'll be okay. Because in my heart, I did not want to act on that craving. And the reason I didn't want to act on that craving is that I had no desire to have drugs and alcohol in my life. And that was a total switch for me. And that's when I knew something was going right, is when my desire for drugs and alcohol was gone. And that remains today. I don't, I have not been asked the question, don't you think you could go back and have just a beer or two? And I've asked myself that question before. I think it's a natural question that we all ask ourselves in recovery as time goes on, especially when we start to realize that we've really found something good. We start to think, well, maybe I am at a point now where I could moderate my use of these things. But the answer for me is very simple. Why would I want to? Why would I want to engage in that behavior? What's the point for me? And because that's a common question that I ask myself these days. What's the point of whatever I'm going to be doing next? And if it's not aligned with my goals in life, then I don't do it. And it's that way with drugs and alcohol. I think about, what's the point of doing this? Why would I want to deaden myself to the world around me, when what I've found in recovery is a way of living that it keeps me higher than I've ever been before, more consistently. I don't need to get drunk at the end of the day to feel something. I can feel something all day long, and it's better than the feeling of getting drunk. So let me read some more of what Tommy says, because he may explain it a little better than I can. So some people have asked me over the years, aren't you recovered now? Can't you drink or smoke a joint without getting into trouble with it? My answer to them is simple. I have no desire to. I love my life as a sober person. I walk this drugless path, and I get to feel everything that happens in life. I get to truly experience what it is to be human, to fail, to be sad, to feel jealousy or envy, to have joy and connection, to love and be loved, to succeed and to be useful to others. Whether I could manage it if I used again is beside the point. To me, the idea of using drugs and alcohol simply makes no sense. Why would I want to intoxicate myself with something that I consider bad for my body, confusing to my mind, and dimming to my spirits? Why would I want to get high in a way that weakens my system when I have at my disposal ways to get truly high that strengthen me at every level? I certainly have not given up getting high. I've had a massive overhaul in my method of doing so. Now, that was a real big knowledge bomb for me, was the idea that I haven't given up getting high. It's just my way of doing so has changed. Things like prayer, meditation, exercise, social activity, caring for others, doing for others. These are the things that get me high now. And when Tommy talks about getting high, he says, this is his definition. He says, engaging in an activity that brings about a shift in consciousness that benefits a person in both the short term and the long term. So, doesn't mean that, we turn to other things to try to get quick thrills. We're really looking at what kind of behaviors, what kind of sustainable behaviors can we engage in that give us these good feelings in both the short term and long term. And all of those behaviors are based in love. When you're acting out of love, when you're caring for other people, when you're caring for yourself, that's where these behaviors come from. And when you bring that into your recovery, then the idea of even trying to use in a moderate way just doesn't make any sense. So I really like the way that he puts a lot of things at the beginning of this chapter. This is the beginning of the section of the book where he describes the Recovery 2.0 methodology and his ideas about, okay, what are the additional things that he did to move beyond the 12 steps into what he really found as the best long-term recovery for him. And so I'm really interested to hear what he has to say. The idea, though, that of living a sober life and living a recovered life out of love rather than fear, it really made a lot of sense to me. And I think it makes a lot of sense to more people than he gives credit for here. I think a lot of people do this and get to that point where they're not sober because they're scared of what happens if they go back. They're sober because they're excited and they love the person that they are and can be moving forward. That's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Have a good one.